Hi. So in last episode, you saw how to take your clay and turn it into slabs, right? So in today's episode, what you're going to learn is how to make those slabs actually stick together using the proper glue that potters use and start to actually create a three-dimensional form. So stay tuned and check things out. So the next thing to do when you're building with slab is you have to make something called slurry. And slurry is like clay glue, okay? So what I do to make slurry is I fill a container with just a minimal amount of water. I actually have a little bit too much there. So I'd say this is like 2 tablespoons, okay? Then I'm going to take some of the clay and I'm going to put it in there and I'm going to start turning it into this slippery goo. Breaking it into pieces. Not too watery, not too thick. And I'm making slurry. If you don't use slurry when you're building with clay, don't bother. Because if you try to hold your pieces of clay together with just water, it will come apart when you fire it. Trust me, it's true. You might think while you're building it, it's like, well, haha, look at me, I was able to hold my pieces together with just water. And then you'll go to fire it, and it'll fall apart, and you'll go, I should have listened to Ron. Slurry. Okay, I'm going to just let that sit in there. Rinse my hands out here. So what I want to do is I want to take this piece and I want to build this clay around it. Okay? Like that, to create kind of a three-dimensional piece. And again, I want it to be really organic. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm already seeing that these are just not big enough, so I'm going to make my base a little bit smaller. Anytime you have any small excess pieces of clay, just put it in your slurry. You end up with this great big container of slurry. And the great thing is if you end up with tons of slurry, you just slowly start to evaporate the water out of it and re-wedge it back into clay. So here, I've got this little base. Now I think this is going to work. I'm just testing it. See, because I haven't glued these on yet, they'll stick. Cut this off. Cut this off. Put some clay to the side. So, I want these to wrap around this, okay? This is how I do it. You take a butter knife or anything that has that kind of toothy, serrated edge to it. Like, don't use something like a steak knife or a bread cutting knife. And what you're going to do is you're scoring the clay. So I'm scratching into it and creating kind of a textural surface. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I hate that. I don't want that texture on my clay. I don't want to see that. You won't. Don't panic. So basically, anywhere where you're going to put 2 pieces of clay together, you need to score it. Scratch it. So I'm getting all of my surfaces scored and scratched and ready. All of my edges. Okay, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some slurry in those spots where the pieces are going to glue together. So I just use my finger and get a good amount of this slippery stuff on there. A little bit on there. And I stick that on. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, I want you to be able to see this. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to take my knife. This is hard to do. And I'm going to smooth that out. Again, don't worry about those edges so much right now. We'll be able to get rid of that. So I'm just reinforcing that like that. See that? That kind of got rid of that seam that was there. And it's just helping to get the clay all together. Now, if you look at it from the inside, I can just leave that like that. Or I can take whatever tool I have, pencil, and just kind of work the clay in there. But what some people like to do, and I've done this too, is you basically make a clay worm. And you just wedge that in there, and you could work that into the clay for just some extra reinforcement. You don't want to go through this whole process to turn around and have your art piece fall apart. Right? That'd suck. Okay, so now I'm going to put this second piece on there. And again, like I said, I could have made one great big long slab and just gone all the way around and would just have to score it and slip it along the bottom and along the one seam where they meet. But because I didn't make my clay pieces long enough, I'm doing 2 pieces at a time. So, like I told you before, I have that slurry on there. I'm just going to add a little bit more. I scored everything. All 3 sides are scored. And I'm going to put this piece on. And they need to meet. So, I do this. I'll do that on the other side. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. See that? You can actually see the slurry ooze out a little bit. And again, just take your knife, reinforce those edges. Reinforce it on the inside. Again, I could add like that clay worm that I talked about on the base. And on the inside where these seams meet, just to make it that much stronger. But I'm thinking just pushing the clay over the seams for what I'm doing will be good enough. But I will put that worm at the bottom. I love clay. It's so much fun to work with. Throw that in there. Roll that worm over to that other side. And push it in. All of this just using a shovel to dig out the mud, bucket to put it in, water, cardboard, and a couple knives, and containers to hold some extra water and slurry. So as you can see, the inside is done, base is done. It's all held together, okay? Very primitive looking vase. But I ain't done. I'll be right back.